Hello and welcome to Inner Work for Greater Good, my show in which I teach people how to do the necessary inner work to truly change the world. And the fact that when we do our inner work, we really are making a difference. As I often say, when we heal the world. And the reason why I think it's really important to put forward this message is because I think a lot of times we have this misperception when it comes to really focusing inward and really looking at what's going on inside and thinking that somehow we're being selfish for doing that, or we're being selfish for focusing on whatever it is that we need, or on healing our own wounds. And when it comes to change makers, which are the people with whom I mostly work, change makers are people who basically want to make a positive difference in the world, want to really affect change in the world, using their gifts and their talents to do so. Is that a lot of times as change makers, we're so focused on the outside and how we can make a difference in other people's lives. And unfortunately, what can often happen then is we tend to neglect what's going on inside of us. And so that's what's really important. But when we focus on what's going on inside of us and we heal those wounds and we bring forward those powers that we may not even know are there, that's when we truly change the world. As I also often say, is when we light up the world. And so my whole intention with this show and with my work through ChangeLight and Inner Work for Greater Good is to really teach you how to understand what's going on inside in a really simple way. That's another thing too. That's one of my other agendas. Is a lot of times when people think about what's going on inside, it feels very complicated. It feels very overwhelming. And my intention is to say, no. It doesn't have to be complicated or overwhelming. I'm here to make it simple. I'm here to clarify what's really going on. So in my first show, I talked about the ChangeLight system, which is the system that I developed basically out of my own struggles with my own inner wounds and triggers, and my own struggles with wanting to be the most effective change maker I could be, except that I kept running into all these blocks and all these issues. And I kept having trouble really stepping into that power that I knew that I had, and that I knew the power to really have an impact on the world. And so I shared, in the last show about the ChangeLight system. So in the next series of shows, I'm going to break that down for you. I'm going to teach you about what it's all about in terms of what are those blocks all about, but then what are the powers that they're really pointing to, and how do you really access those so that you can truly access what I call your inner treasure, which is your truth. And my attitude is, as we live our truth, that's when we truly light up, and that's when we truly change the world. So what we're about here are some pretty big things, starting from the inside out and really healing our planet and healing the world from the inside out. Again, it can sometimes feel very overwhelming. Obviously, there are a lot of problems in our world and a lot of struggles and issues and things that we need to address. And as I say, a lot of times the wounds that the issues that we see in the world really do originate from our inner woundedness as humans and in civilization and all of these inner problems. So as we heal what's going on inside, then we help heal the world, because when we heal, we show up so much better for others and for ourselves, and we light up, and when we do what brings us joy, we bring more joy to the world. When we feel more at peace with ourselves, we bring peace to the world. So this is really, really important stuff. And so that's really what I want to focus on. Again, making all of this really simple so that you can really learn how to do this inner work for greater good. So in this show, I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see. Share, hold on one second. Here we go. Inner work for greater good. So, what I want to share with you, this, by the way, is my homepage, just so you have an idea of that ChangeLight is all about inner work for greater good. And it's about helping us as change makers, those of us who really want to make a difference, teaching us how to do the inner work for affecting that greater good. And as I shared in my last show, we've got basically with my work, what I've identified are the exPowers, mPowers, your guiding star, and your truth. And I'm going to share a little bit of my own story in this show, because I want you to understand that it's not as though this is some sort of concept that I just sort of came up with, you know, some cool idea. No, these are very real things that are happening inside of us. And that when we know how to access or heal those parts, then can we truly access that truth and live our truth and light up the world. So we've got your exPowers, your mPowers, your guiding star, your truth. And in this show, I'm going to focus on exPowers. Let's break this down. exPowers, but actually, first I'm going to share a little bit of my own story. Actually, let me go back. So basically, a number of years ago, back in about 2008, right as I was on the precipice. Now, I described how I'm a change maker, and I really have always wanted to make a big difference in the world. And I always knew that I could, but I was so blocked and I was so triggered by everything. And but the thing is, it was like, so I really struggled for a lot of years to figure out, well, what's my thing and how am I here to make a difference in the world? And I tried a lot of things over the years. So go to like 2007, 2008, you know, really things seemed like they were really starting to come together finally, after all these different things I'd tried and all these different approaches I'd taken and using my talents in this way and that way, you know. And then I met the man I thought I was going to marry. And then I was, you know, we were starting a business with this other couple. And it really was like, wow, it's really going to happen. Well, it didn't. In fact, the opposite happened. Everything fell apart. The relationship fell apart, the business fell apart, and I fell apart, and my life pretty much fell apart. And I fell into a really bad shame spiral, a deep, dark night of the soul, in which I lost all sense of any, you know, clarity or faith or belief in myself. And I was deeply, deeply self-loathing. And so the point is that what it was excruciating. And I often say I would never wish that level of pain on my worst enemy. And yet, interestingly enough, it was actually the thing that led to my discovering what is my truth and my purpose and the impact I'm here to have. And how I'm here to have that impact. So it was in my worst dark night of the soul that things actually started to open up. And truth started to emerge, even though I didn't necessarily realize it at the time. So I'll tell you that it started, the worst night when it really first kind of culminated was in 2009. I don't remember, it was, I think, in February or something. But I was in a really, really bad place. And to the point where I wanted to end it all. Frankly, I actually had these sad kind of visions of like jumping out of the window. It was really bad. And I knew that if I didn't call someone, it would not be good. And so my best friend at the time, who is now my husband, I knew that he'd be busy with his daughters over in Arizona. I was in Texas. And so I called my mother, who's a psychotherapist, and she's been really, really wonderful. But at the same time, I never really wanted to bother her with my problems. But I knew that if I didn't talk to someone who could sort of help settle me down, it would be bad. So anyway, the point is I called her, and long story shorter, the conversation ended up helping me identify that all of this self-loathing that I was feeling wasn't necessarily me. It was a part of me. She actually referred to it as a bully, that all this hatred that I was feeling towards myself, and just, you know, you're terrible, you're awful, you're ugly, you're a failure, you've never done anything right. This messages that I was feeling is really, I was hearing it from a part of me. And so anyway, I ended that night, you know, saying thank you so much. And she'd really helped me. So the next morning I ended up writing a blog that I called Living with a Bully Inside Me. And my intention really for writing it was to try to get rid of this feeling, but it wasn't working. And I sort of felt a little bit better. But interestingly, what ended up happening instead was, as I was writing about this bully that was tearing me down, I started getting flashes of what this bully looked like. And it was this really monstrous, horrific, bloody thing. And I thought, well, you know what? Let's see, I've already talked about how I feel. That didn't really totally work. I'm sitting here writing about how I feel and what's going on inside of me, and that's not really working. So what the heck? I don't know. Maybe if I just draw this monster inside of me. And so what ended up happening was I went home and I sat down with some crayons and paper, and I was like, okay, don't think, just draw. And so I sat down and started scribbling what I was seeing. Long story shorter, I ended up drawing this thing that I just, flashed in front of you a second ago. So this was the monster that I drew, and I called him a monster. And at the time, and the point is you can see, without getting into too much detail, basically you can see that here he is, sharp and spiky, and everything about him is very sharp and scary. And he's like got green fur, and he's got claws and fangs, and there's blood coming off of him. So this is what came out basically of my subconscious. And as I looked at him, I was kind of astounded because I couldn't believe this thing was inside me. And obviously this was not an actual monster inside of me, but it was how it felt. It felt that it felt like there was this monster actually ripping me to shreds. And what I realized as I looked at him and saw all that blood, I realized that was my blood. Because he had ripped me to shreds from the inside out. And not only that, it was that he was very focused on getting rid of any possible joy that was inside of me. He would just tear me down. So here's the cool thing. And the reason why this is important is because this moment turned out to be the first step of a technique that I ended up developing and discovering to actually permanently heal these parts. Is that when I drew him out, within a few minutes after I drew him out, he disappeared. He was gone. And I felt amazing. I felt blissful. I felt just free. And I realized, you know what, I think I've got something here. This is kind of incredible, because I'd already tried all these other techniques to heal myself and to heal from all of these horrible things and feelings that I had. So I ended up drawing out all of these vicious things inside of me, or not even all vicious things. Sometimes it was a part of me that felt like I was just, it was holding me back, it was causing me to procrastinate. And so I drew like procrastinator monster, or I drew another part of me that was, telling me that I was never doing anything right and always trying to undermine my confidence. And so the point is, I had these different parts of me, or I had parts of me that I drew in which it was like, I'd suddenly be enraged about something and I'd feel really reactive and really angry. And so I drew out those parts of me, I'd call it like, fighter monster, punch me, or something like that. And so I would write down what they would say and I would draw them out, and I felt more and more amazing. So that then led to, as I alluded to, the development and the discovery of the drawing out process, which permanently heals these parts inside. Now, I referred to, at the time I called them monsters, and actually some people might refer to them as, inner triggers, inner blocks and blind spots, and, parts of the ego, parts of the pain body. I call them something else, as I refer to, I call them exPowers. I call them exPowers for a couple of reasons. But first of all, let's just talk about what are exPowers. So exPowers are the parts of you that are stuck in chronic states of stress, reactivity, and pain. They are your subconscious, unhealed wounds and defenses. They think, feel, and behave according to what they learned from stressful or painful experiences, or that they developed in reaction to them. They also, and this is what's really important when we talk about the inner work for greater good and accessing that truth inside and really changing the world from the inside out, they also, exPowers also obstruct your ability to feel fully at peace and empowered and to actualize your truth. So basically, that's what this thing was inside of me. It was this huge part of me, that first monster that I call him now. And actually, he's on my wall in the kitchen. I framed him, and as a reminder that he is the one that tipped it off. One of the worst nights of my life ended up leading to discovering the truth about what's going on with these parts of us that get in the way. And that they get in the way of really the light that we already have inside. As I often say, you have all of the power you need to be everything you are here to be. And so that's where exPowers, that's where it's important to understand about exPowers, because exPowers are those parts that are getting in the way of that feel like they're getting in the way of that. Because actually there's some really cool secret things about exPowers. So that I'll share with you in later in later shows. But the point is that we have to, when it comes to exPowers, it's really important to really understand what's going on, because if you don't understand, then you're doomed to fight with them, argue with them, struggle with them, which is what I had been doing up until I started drawing them out. So here's one of the thing is, what do exPowers do? Well, they control you subconsciously. It's one of those things where there's so much going on. You know, as I said, exPowers are those parts that form in response to those experiences that we have growing up or even in adulthood. They form in response to those situations that in some way or another caused us fear or pain, or actually, most importantly, what I've discovered when it comes to exPowers, anything that on some level cause us to feel unsafe. It could be unsafe in the world, unsafe. It could be physically unsafe, emotionally unsafe, mentally unsafe, but unsafe in some way or another. So for example, if you had someone who criticized you, or many people who criticized you, and I think we all do, right? Some parts of you are going to form subconsciously to try to protect you from experiencing that criticism again. And so that's the thing, is that they're working behind the scenes. They're deep in that subconscious. And I just want to point out, that's where actually drawing, and this is a whole other huge conversation we can have, but that's why drawing is so important, because here are these exPowers controlling us subconsciously, but when we draw them out, we actually bring them out of that darkness and into the light, so that they can't control us as much from, under the surface. I love the way my mother puts it. She's been a wonderful mentor of mine. And she says, it's kind of like a computer, and you see your desktop and you're like, oh, well, there's this file folder and that file folder. But there are all kinds of programs going on behind that desktop that you don't even see, that you don't even know are there. And so to further that metaphor, it's sort of like they're like glitches, or they're like viruses. I don't really like to call them that, because they're not bad. And there's more to understand about exPowers, but they're like these sort of glitches that cause our computer, if you will, of our minds and our hearts, and our consciousness to kind of not operate fully and effectively. And so here it is. They make you think, feel, and behave in unhelpful ways. They are also at the root of your inner blocks, triggers, and patterns. And this is really important, because a lot of times we behave in ways that we just have these unconscious reactions. And sometimes it's so interesting to me, as the more I've done this work and the more I've healed these parts of me, is that sort of more, as you do the work more and more, the more and more you kind of go, oh, wow, I never even really noticed that I would have that reaction. But now that I'm aware of it, oh, I see. And so then what I will do personally in terms of my own inner work is I will then pay attention and draw those parts out, because I don't want to be having those subconscious reactions, because what ends up happening is they become triggers, they become buttons that people can punch, if you will, and they really get in the way of, as I say, obstruct your ability to connect with others in healthy ways. And so going back to the whole thing about change makers and wanting to have an impact, positive impact on the world, how we feel inside and whatever's going on with us internally has a direct impact on how we relate to other people. And that a lot of times we may be having these subconscious reactions or getting triggered by things that are causing us to behave in ways or react to situations that are not entirely helpful, that are actually counterproductive, or that are even sabotaging. They can cause us to end up, as much as we may have good intentions for wanting to have a good impact, we can ultimately unconsciously be sabotaging the impact we have because of how we're showing up in a particular situation, and not even realizing that how our behavior may be impacting other people. So they obstruct our ability to connect with others. They're at the roots of our inner blocks, our triggers, our patterns, which, by the way, what's so great about that is that as you heal exPowers, you heal those triggers and those patterns. I often say, no one can punch your buttons unless you have the buttons to punch. So as we heal those inner exPowers and draw them out, then we don't have those buttons anymore. Then those situations that caused us to be so reactive in the past, and we're like, oh, why am I behaving this way? Oh, why am I reacting this way? It's all good because, you heal that part of you and it's like, oh, wow, that's not really bothering me so much anymore. So anyway, and then finally, exPowers fragment and darken you. So in the image that I showed before, I mean, you could see that on the left, you see the exPowers. They're darker, they're fragmented. Well, that's because they're parts of us that in some way or another have fallen into darkness. And so finally, they obscure your truth. The truth about it is, and I talked about this in my first show, is that we all have a truth. You have a truth. I have a truth. Every single one of us has a capital T truth inside of us. And your truth is who you are and who you're here to be. It's that knowing you have inside. It's your inner compass. It's that knowing, that awareness, that presence that guides us in our lives to become who we're here to be who we're here, to be who we are, and to become who we are here to be. So it's this wonderful, simultaneous sort of paradigm. It's a simultaneity thing, if you will, where it's the both and of my truth is who I am, and my truth is who I'm here to be. It knows who I'm here to be. So when we've got those exPowers, they get in the way. So that's what it's all about. So then what do you do with your exPowers? Well, I've already sort of shared that. Draw them out, understand them, heal them. And that's what my intention is with ChangeLight system and inner work for greater good is to teach you about the truth of your exPowers and about how to face them in a healthy way so that you can more deeply, clearly understand them. Because when we understand what's going on with these parts of us, it's so much easier to heal them. Then we're not so afraid or triggered by or resistant to these parts. That's one of the reasons why, I shared that story about my drawing out that first monster of mine, is that when I drew him out, it was so interesting how in that case, I didn't need to argue with him. I'd been resisting him. I'd been fighting him. I'd been trying not to feel that way. But when we turn around and we face those parts of us that feel like they're getting in the way or that feel like that are causing us pain, it's interesting how, so much of the time subconsciously we fight them or we argue with them or we resist them because we think that that's how we can sort of keep them at bay or keep them from overpowering us or controlling us. But what I've actually found is it's the opposite, that as we actually face and draw out these parts of us, that's how we can really understand them. And some of the things that I came to understand about that first monster is that, there he was hurting me, but ultimately what he just wanted my attention. And as soon as he got my attention, then he was gone. I didn't have to talk to him about anything. He disappeared. Some exPowers need a little bit more. And that's what the full drawing out process is about. It's about really guiding those parts to permanently transform and heal so that they're no longer in the way. But in his case, it was really kind of fabulous. And that's the case with a lot of exPowers, is they just want to be heard. They just want to be seen. They just want to be understood. Because ultimately what I've also come to discover about exPowers is that every single exPower has good intentions for us, okay? They're either trying to protect us or they're trying to protect themselves. And the parts, and I'm gonna get into that actually in the next 3 shows where I'm gonna teach you individually about the 3 types of exPowers that exist inside of us, because there are 2 types that are trying to protect us, and there's 1 type that's trying to protect itself, which in essence is actually trying to protect a part of us, a very precious and innocent and wonderful types of parts of us inside. So that's what it's all about. So what do you do with those exPowers? Draw them out, understand them, heal them. And here's the cool thing, the most awesome thing that happens when you do that is that when you actually face those parts and really understand and have is like you start to have compassion for those parts and realize that, oh, wait a minute, that part of me developed in response to that trauma that I suffered, or that part of me developed in response to that comment that that kid made on the playground when I was 6 years old, or that part of me, formed in response to when my teacher said that thing to me and it really hurt my feelings. I mean, it can be something massive like a major trauma or growing up in a very unsafe environment, or it can be something even sort of seemingly minor. I had a client once who, really it was a comment on the playground that some other kid made that the kid later admitted was just a joke, but it so deeply wounded my client that he ended up forming this exPower. It was all about trying to protect him from ever being ridiculed like that again, ever being made to feel small like that again. And there's a particular type of exPower, and I'm going to share those in the next, as I said, in the next few shows. But the point is it can be something that as an adult seems so innocuous to us, but really as a child, it was traumatizing and it was hurtful. But here's the thing, and this is what this slide is about, is that we have these exPowers, but what's so cool is that all they are just distorted parts of what I call our mPowers. Again, I'm going to get into all of this. We're going to talk about the 3 exPower types and the 3 mPower types in this show. So definitely stay tuned for more. But that basically what we're dealing with when we're dealing with exPowers are just distorted parts of our power that have been distorted by those situations that made us feel in fear or in pain, that made us feel unsafe in some way or another, unsafe to be ourselves, to show up fully as ourselves in the world. It's interesting how even joy can be something that we have an exPowers that form to prevent us from feeling, because usually it's because we've had some experience where we felt some kind of joy and someone criticized us or tried to tear us down, or because there was some disappointment that resulted after that. And so that's where it's, we have this amazing system inside whose intentions is to protect us. But ultimately, our exPowers are just parts of our mPowers that have it's like they've fallen into darkness. They're parts of our light that have fallen into darkness. And so it's all about bringing them back to light and back to life. And so this is all part of this inner work for greater good, because as we bring them back to light, what happens, right? As we transform our darkness back to light, we become more light. And when we light up the world. And that's what this is about. So this again is the full sort of your exPowers. So as we heal those exPowers and we end up revealing our wonderful mPowers, and then guiding star in truth, which I talked about in the first show, and that this is what it's all about. We're all about your truth here. Your truth is the treasure that we are after here. And so it's vital that we start by facing those exPowers, those parts of us that feel like they're in the way, because the truth is they're just fragmented parts of our light. As I said, you have all of the power you need to be who you are here to be. But in order to access that power, in order to access that light, fighting those parts doesn't work. One of the things I love talking about is how what actually happens is when we fight those parts of us, like when we fight those inner exPowers, because we don't like them. As I said before, they're parts of our triggers or our patterns or our pain, or they cause us to behave in ways that we don't like. But the problem is when we fight them, we actually make them worse. We actually cause them to fight back. And the reason for that is what I call the physics of emotion, is that it's just like for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And when we push against that part of us or push against it this way, it just fights back. And so this is really about turning towards and embracing those parts of us and understanding them. And when I say embracing, I don't mean I wouldn't say oh, I should have, embraced that monster that was so awful and scary and go, oh, sure, it's okay. You can tell me how awful I am. No, but just turning towards them and facing them and understanding them and recognizing that ultimately every part of us is just trying to protect us or itself, whatever way it knows. And so as we can do that, we can have compassion for that part of us, and then it reduces that resistance inside. And then what you get is less fragmentation. I mean, it's amazing to me how we're all like, so many people are walking wounded here and so fragmented because of the experiences, as opposed to feeling one, feeling whole. And so it's about reducing that inner resistance and realizing that those parts that may feel like they're working against your power. One of the reasons why I call them exPowers is because X means against, working against your power, is that actually it's just been distorted and its intentions really are good. And when we can understand those, we can help those parts of us heal. And of course, the other reason why I call them exPowers is because they are former parts of your power. So they're former parts of your empowers. And so it's all about reclaiming that power, that light within us, and channeling it so that we can actually discover that truth and then channel it to really have the impact that we're here to have. So I just feel it's really important to emphasize the importance of having to, of really facing those dark parts as well in order to really access that light inside. So, and I shared this in the last show, but I just wanted to share this with you again. Until we have met the monsters in ourselves, we keep trying to slay them in the outer world. And we find that we cannot. For all of the darkness in the world stems from darkness in the heart. And it is there that we must do our work. Marianne Williamson, of course, wonderful. We must do our work inside, because as we are transforming our own darkness back to light, we're bringing more light to the world. We are having an impact, not just by what we do, but by who we are, by the light and the joy and the presence that we radiate, and also by the fact that we can be more present in every interaction we have, or even as we face challenges, rather than being triggered and resistant and all of those things that we tend to struggle with, that can really keep us from stepping into that power and really living the truth that we know we are here to live. So really quickly, my community, I have an online community that I just launched. I want to share this with you. All I did in this show was share just the basics about exPowers. But in my community is, you've got the course where I go way more deeply into all of this. And you get all of it at once. Basically, you get understanding the exPowers and the 3 types, and understanding the empowers and the 3 types, and how to access your truth and actualize it so that you can truly change the world in the highest way possible. So just want to let you know about that, community.changelight.world. I would love to have you in there. And thank you so much for watching. I am so grateful to share this information with you. As I said, I'm going to be doing then, we just talked about the basics of exPowers in this show, but in the next 3 shows, I'm going to break down the 3 different types. You are not going to want to miss that. It's going to be awesome because they're so interesting and fascinating. And I guarantee I'm going to share some information with you that's just going to blow your mind in all kinds of wonderful ways. All right, so thank you so much. And I look forward to us talking some more again.